Welcome to the Phygital Dish, where we serve up fresh insights on how technology is bridging the gap between physical and digital, creating seamless and personalized interactions for businesses and consumers alike. Let's dig in. The Phygital Dish. This is becoming a regular occurrence, Courtney. We're making this a thing right now, right? So
you know what, we're trying.
I'm excited. That's right, we're trying. Hopefully, there's a few folks that are out there that have caught some previous episodes now and are starting to figure out that they might want to hear what we have to say, or at least just come back to make fun of us later, right? You know, so
both are fine.
Either way.
Both are fine. It still ticks the listeners up.
That's right. So today, we're going to talk about something that's actually become kind of near and dear to me over the last few months. But before we get there, I've got a question for you. So I think we've all been there, but have you been in that situation where you go to the store, maybe you've been asked to get something by somebody in the family, or you're going there for yourself, and you're in the back of the store, and you look at the price tag and you think, man, I really wish there was a coupon for this. And you go to pull up your phone, you go to look, and you don't have the mobile app for the store, but then you find it online, but you can't get connected, and you can't find that app. Tell me about that experience. You enjoyed that experience? Is that a good thing for you?
I love it. I'm one of the people that like waits in like a drive-through line or something. It's like, hold on, let me pull the app is loading. It's coming up. I promise you. And then when I walk into a store and everything was working perfect, I've got it, I think saved on my phone. Some of them don't allow you to save screenshots. And the moment I walk in, it's like, oh, dead zone. There's no internet. I can't connect to anything. The Wi-Fi's down. Nothing makes me more furious than that. So are you trying to hurt me right now?
No, I'm not, but it's relative to today's conversation, right? Because today's conversation is actually, we're going to talk a little bit about retail media networks. And as we know, we like to start with a little appetizer, right? And so let's talk a little bit about an appetizer. That appetizer is that idea that like there's brands out there who are now using their collective voice for themselves, right? We'll talk about this in a bit more detail, but they're using their collective voice to communicate in advertising, in discounts, in whatnot, in a way that's becoming purposeful to the cycle of buying. And here's the thing: it's for the benefit of the brand, but it's also for the benefit of the customer, right? Of the consumer. So, I think what is cool about this, and what I want to kind of talk about today, is the greater cycle of retail media networks. I mean, we're hearing it, right? Walmart and Target and now Home Depot is getting on the train, and it's big numbers. It's not just millions, but now it has B's in front of it. It has billions of dollars that are being spent in web and mobile and these spaces.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Well, I think wasn't it something like $50 billion in the next year that's gonna be spent on retail media networks?
North of 50. Yes.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I think it's because of there's been so many ways to try to attract consumers in this omni-channel universe. The direct to consumer ads from different ad agencies that you were contracting out to, trying to do things in web where now data privacy concerns are limiting the effectiveness of third-party cookies. There's a lot of things that we're just pushing towards the brands to move to this model. And why not use one of the brand's most valuable assets, which is their brand, right? They have followers of their brand. Why not use that collective, asset to their own benefit? Yeah, it's been coming for a long time, and now I think we're at that precipice, and it's going to start to go crazy.
I think it is, and actually, you hit on two things that I think are very interesting, right? One is just this idea of the follower of the brand, right? You already have your voice in their space. How do you use that more fervently or more valuably for both the consumer and the brand? But I think you hit on something else in there, and especially on the Phygital Dish, we should talk about this: the sweetness or the bitterness of the cookie, right?
Okay.
So as we start to see, cookies were the greatest way to track online and know that people were going and attributable sales. As the cookie is in flux, what do we find there, and what's the value to the consumer of the cookie to be tracked? But then we get into this different discussion, which we're going to talk about today, especially in the main course, is this idea of translating that online cookie into something that
in
is
store,
that is sweet
tangible
in store, tangible in store.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So if you knew nothing about retail media networks, we kind of laid a little bit of the groundwork here. We talked about it a little bit, but act like, because I'm not the expert on this, what are retail media? Where did they come from? What are they? What are they for? Just explain to me, through the Ivy-isms, because you've used some good words, fervently and so drop some knowledge on me about retail media networks.
It's really interesting, and other people who've talked to me recently have heard me say this. I wasn't even really talking about retail media networks a year and a half ago or a year ago, even almost at NRF 2024. Now I talk about it 3, 4, 5 times a day. It's a topic that's on everybody's mind, so I think a little education is always a good thing, and I appreciate that question. Let's start with kind of the core, and we've hit on it a little bit in the opening comments. A retail media network is for the brand, by the brand. So when you really think about that statement, it's a network, an advertising network opportunity that is built for the brand. So the brand that's rolling it out, the Walmart, the Target, the Casey's General Store, the Home Depot, whoever that may be, and it is by the brand. They own that retail space. They are owning that ad space. So they're not bringing in a third-party ad sales group who is taking kind of this big spray and pray kind of an environment. It's very, very focused for the brand, by the brand. Okay. The other thing, though, to remember about retail media networks is that over the last, call it 2 to 3 years at most, what people have really entered this space doing is selling, as we talked about with the cookie, selling web and mobile space. These brands have massive followings, millions of followers that are either have downloaded their mobile app or they're joining them on the web space, utilizing that in an advertising model that is very well known, understood.
Oh yeah,
it's a space that everybody gets, right? There's a lot of natural understanding of that space.
Yeah.
What has happened in 2024 and late 2023 and 2024 is people are now saying that's awesome. We don't want to injure, hurt, or get rid of any of that web mobile space, e-commerce space in advertising, but we now want to move into the retail center. So now the conversation is becoming retail media networks at retail.
Yeah.
It sounds
crazy
stupid,
concept, right?
Right, exactly.
We were using digital means to get to try to attract people into our physical stores because for some reason they weren't coming in, right? But now it's almost like, these brands themselves are becoming a real estate company for internal real estate. So subletting space inside of their stores, right?
Yep. Yeah. That's exactly right. And when you look at the big box retailers, or you look at retailers where there are lots and lots of brands that are sitting on the shelves, convenience store is such a good example of this, right? They have 5,000 SKUs. They might have 250 brands inside of a C-store. That is an opportunity, to your point, to lease that space from an advertising perspective. And although historically there are still relationships around co-op dollars and promotional activities that are tied, they tie the brand to a CPG or to a consumer packaged good. This is augmenting that so that you're getting multiple opportunities to monetize that space. And then from the consumer perspective, it's an opportunity for the consumer to then have an experience they might not have had before. They might find a brand that they didn't know previously, or they might find a deal that they didn't realize was going to be out there. And so this is a monetization of those digital platforms in the e-commerce spaces we talked about, but now at retail, in window, outdoor digital signage, but still in the retail center. But then indoor is really the key area. End cap spaces, shelf edge spaces, as well as just at point of purchase.
Yeah, or be able to find a coupon when I need it in store.
Exactly, or be able to find a coupon when you need it.
And so I guess the benefit for the brands, so the ones that are renting the space, the larger brands themselves, the Home Depots, Targets, Walmarts, they have a good wealth of first party data, meaning they know when these products are bought, they know where in their store they're being bought from, the aisle planning. They've done a lot of analytics on where products need to be more appropriately set around. And I'm assuming that they share that with these other brands to say, this is a pretty premium space. I mean, this is the creme de la creme of space right here, getting this many passerbys daily. So it's kind of, how are they sold? Is it like an auction system? Do I come up and say, this is the one you want, and you can move up to this one later, you can have this space now? How do they pick, and how do they get people to buy into these retail media networks?
It's very interesting. I think this is part of the refinement of this conversation of at retail RMN. And so if you think about the end cap space or the aisle, the high end aisle space in a retail space, before it was a co-op environment where the merchandising teams were coming together and they were saying, hey, this is very valuable. I will pay you some discount to put my product there, or I'll pay you physically to put it there, right? Depending on kind of where the negotiations were. What retail media has said is, hey, I'm the brand. I'm still going to give you that really high-end end cap space. But the space that's right by the POS, where people are standing there, they're waiting in line, they might be there captured for 90 seconds or 2 minutes or even 3 minutes. I'm going to break that up into 15-second segments. I'm going to break it up into 10-second segments. And I'm going to sell those segments to all the brands who want to buy in that space. Yeah. And I'm going to do that either in what might be referred to as an endemic buy. An endemic ad is something that I probably sell in my retail space. Think Red Bull or Coke or something, a Hershey product that's on the shelf at a C-store. Versus a non-endemic ad, someone who might be related to me, right? Something that I might support, but really it's outside my space. In the retail media network environment, the endemic ads are really driving the conversation because those brands want to sell more of their product. They're already in the space, so the brand wants more of that product to get sold. And so that becomes a very valuable space. And they're sold through traditional means. They're sold through advertising platforms, that are out there, the Vistars and the Hivestacks of the world. They're also sold directly, right? They're sold through somebody calling up and doing the old school, hey, I've got space, you want to buy it, right? And then it's getting inserted. And then that's where SageNet kind of steps in and helps manage, and as well as other network operators, to really drive that into the market and make those screens valuable. But you hit on something I think that's actually very key, which is this idea of attribution data. And there's, over my 20 plus years in this industry, I've learned a lot of acronyms. But I have to say, in June, I'm sitting at a conference and I'm listening, and this acronym comes up, and the first time I heard it, I was like, what'd they say? And then I heard it again, and I was like, okay, I got to figure that out. It's ROAS. ROAS. Some of you listening to this go, oh yeah, sure, I know what ROAS is.
Yeah.
I had no idea what
ROAS. Or they act like they do. They're going to learn now.
ROAS is return on advertising spend, right? So it's a version of ROI, but the reality is those advertisers are calculating ROAS. And now when you move into the retail space, they are asking the brand and the market owner to be able to give them the ROAS of that advertising spend.
Right.
That's a very common calculation in e-commerce. Well, now it's moving into this space to be able to calculate that and find that value.
Well, and it's I guess it's kind of subjective as well, because you just talked about the space that's in front of the counter. How do you know that they didn't view that from 20 feet away when they're never at the counter? Like, where did they actually see those things? And it gets, honestly, with all of this more digital focus, it gets into an area that I'm a little more comfortable with. And I got to ask the question of, one of the biggest technical challenges that I've heard about is, one, you got to get the technology in there, but two, you got to keep it alive. You got to keep it flowing. You got to keep it real, like real time. And that's where I've seen the challenges, and I've said this saying over and over. We're building the experience of tomorrow on the foundation of yesterday, right? We're just stacking things on top of, hoping this doesn't break, right? It's what is the saying? It's all of this beautiful stuff, but this down here is maintained by that one thankless guy in Nebraska. Well,
exactly.
That thankless guy in Nebraska is the network sometimes in these locations. So for me, I feel like that's kind of been a challenge, and something over the last couple of years that's held some organizations back from really just diving forward with what's needed for this, because there is infrastructure. It's not, you can't just put it on what you have today, most likely, right? Sometimes you're going to have to upgrade, update, enhance what's inside of your environment.
Well, and I think that actually brings up a very interesting point, which is, I've been on the digital side forever, and I get to play with cool screens and putting up great video and making sure the customer sees it. And yet now we are coming to a place that, although we are not talking about direct personal information, we are talking about attributable information.
Yeah.
Right? And whether that's coming through the loyalty space or whether it's coming through just general buying patterns, and brands know a lot more about us than we probably want them to know in the grand scheme of things.
Oh yeah.
And so you get into this conversation around security. And so I'm actually interested, whether I know a lot about the front end. I guarantee I do not know a lot about the back end. Are brands asking you about those concerns with either GDPR regulations or cybersecurity regulations, data packaging regulations that are associated with retail media networks these days?
Yeah, and the concerns are growing. I mean, I think the biggest thing is the concerns around the unknown, because GDPR is one thing, but in a lot of the spaces that we play in, like in the continental US, there's not a single federal regulation on it. Not that's got teeth. There's a lot of state and municipal regulations on it, and that's kind of the problem of, how do I know, as both a brand and then the media networks, what data can I collect? What can I store? How long can I store it? If I'm storing it for this long, when do I have to get rid of it? And so there's just this uncertainty around, when am I going to have a standard that I can just say, this is the baseline? And I would say you're right that brands probably know more about us than we know, right? We freely give information out there. But the point behind that is, we as consumers should always know what information the brand knows about us at all times, and be able to say, this is my list, this is when you collected it, this is how you collected it, the channel that you collected it on, and this is when you need to get rid of it. Or I need to tell you, on this day you're getting rid of it and it's gone, and prove it to me. And can we do that today in these, not just retail media networks, but just in any of how we market, how brands market to consumers? That is an art that we've not solved for that yet. And so when a regulation does come down, I doubt it's going to be as stringent as GDPR and some of the other EU data protection policies are, just the nature of the beast. But when they do start to come down, we have to be much more planful as brands, and then supporters of the brands, of what data do we collect? How do we collect it? How do we store it? How do we show a consumer that this is what we got, where we got it from, and this is how we can prove that we will get rid of it when you ask? That, I think, is the bigger challenge. Is not necessarily the data that's out there, because most of the time a consumer's implying that, yep, I trust you. They click a box. Nobody reads the EULAs. Right? So they just go through it. But when they want it gone, or when they want to ask, how did you get my information? We have to be able to tell them. We've got to be able to be more responsible with the data that's being collected out there. So that's a hot topic. CCPA is probably the closest one, but it's still not there. There is no right to be forgotten built into that. So it's still kind of a little bit Wild West right now, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think that's relative to if I think about the greater RMN space. If you really think about what's going on there, right? We've all been there. We go out, our kid asks us, or I think about something I want. I go online, I look at it. Next thing I know, I'm getting ads in my
100
Instagram
ads
feed that are for that, and then
Yeah.
all of
Oh
a
my
sudden,
gosh.
now what we're saying, because this is the reality of retail media networks, is when I walk into a space, right? I walk into a Dick's Sporting Goods, or I walk into a Target, or I walk into a Walmart. I'm now going to see that ad potentially track me into there and then show up in my vision profile as I walk through that point of purchase space.
Yeah.
That although it could be extremely valuable, or should be extremely valuable, not only for the brand but for the consumer in the long run, if you really are in that buying profile, it also does come, to your point, with some very clear need to understand, why am I giving up this data? What does it mean? And I think that's a real key profile in this, and I think that's where we're headed with this.
Yeah. So let's move into kind of dessert on this, and I want to double tap on something you just said, and something I kind of said earlier of, the data is we're giving it out freely. Like we're constantly providing data to everybody, and to back to your point on you search for something over here and it just shows up on every profile. Sometimes that's good, because sometimes I don't want to ask, what do you want for Christmas? That's
right.
I know it shows up on every platform that I have. Right. But brands run the risk of, we almost get to that creepy factor, a little bit. How do brands continue to strike that balance of, we've got enough information to make a great surprise and delight, enjoyable experience for you, that if you opt in, because I'd be a fan of opt in. I would love to try it. Like if I walk into a store and say, your ad follows you, welcome, Courtney. These are the things that you looked at. This is a section, go this way type stuff. We've seen some of that augmented reality type thing in like airlines, that it's just for you type advertising. I would love to see that type of stuff go into retail and others, but we run that risk of how much is too much. And so what are your thoughts on that? Like where is it going to get to? Are we going to use technologies, AI or something else to really correlate, to say this is when this data would be appropriate versus it's not appropriate over here? Right now, I feel like it's just everything all at once.
Yeah, sticking with the dessert theme, dessert is supposed to be so good that it just makes you want more, right? So there is a topic here that we didn't really cover, but if from a more perspective, I think this becomes a conversation around digital out of home versus retail media networks. We didn't really talk about that. Digital out of home is a much broader segment. It's the idea of when you see digital billboards out in the world, that's in the digital out of home space. It's a very generalized advertising space. Think more like television, right? From a buy and sell perspective. Retail media networks, I think where they capitalize at retail is where the experience allows the consumer to have that tracking follow them, but still be in a very narrow band of interaction. So when I walk into a CVS, for example, someone who's spoken about having RMN in the future and moving forward, especially at retail, how do I go to a CVS and have a purposeful interaction with CVS and with a brand that I was looking for in the retail space? I don't want to go to CVS and get blasted by 10 ads I looked for that are relative to the hardware store next door. Right. So how does, and I think that's really the key here is, how do we continue to shape that interaction with the consumer so that the narrow casting aspect of the RMN still provides value to the consumer while it's creating value in the advertising realm of the retailer?
Yeah.
And that's a very key piece of this, I think, in the future.
I think for me, I want to have that experience with the brand. I don't want IV standing next to me or behind me in line having that same experience. Like, what are you experiencing over there? I don't want other people experiencing my experience. It's my experience. So Yeah, it's interesting. I would, for me, as we cap off dessert, you've tied into dessert a couple times. You talk about Hershey's and like,
we've done well.
Yeah. Are you one of the guys that starts with dessert first? Sometimes you like look at that menu.
You know what's so interesting? I think you know me well enough. I'll start with an espresso. I usually pass on dessert, actually.
Yeah.
So, but there are a few things like a Reese's peanut butter cup. It's going to be hard for me to pass on.
It's going to be tough.
Those.
That's going to be tough. Yeah. Well, for me, I think, it's just keeping up with the data protection laws is part of this, making sure the experience is my experience of my own, opting in, and that, man, just don't let your awesome experiences outpace what it's built on, because that,
exactly,
when that fails, all of it fails. So just make sure it's all put together cleanly. So Ivy, thank you for teaching me something today.
Absolutely.
I was lowest belt probably on retail media networks. I'm not highest belt now. I know what ROAS is.
There you go.
I would have told you I knew what it was before as well.
There you go.
So
there you go.
Appreciate the insights and appreciate everybody else for joining us today. Joining on this ride on the Phygital Dish, talking about retail media networks. Yeah. So until next time, guys, appreciate you guys for joining.
That's right. Thanks, Court, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for tuning in to the Phygital Dish, where the physical and digital worlds collide, transforming businesses and the consumer experience. We hope today's episode left you full with insights you need to stay ahead in this evolving landscape. But don't forget to subscribe, share, and bring your appetite next time for another serving of expert advice and innovations from the intersection of technology and business. Until next time, here's to staying connected, staying hungry for innovation, and keeping it phygital.